It is confusing. And this is not a simplistic topic. It demands nuance. Children, young boys, they can't handle nuance.
And I think that those are the men that are most susceptible to this terrible messaging that we're talking about. How are men supposed to access care that allows them to find that identity, find their masculinity, find ways in which to portray that in a healthy way if there isn't a space for them to do that? Hello and welcome to Awake at the Wheel. So I want to start this episode just by asking a simple question. Are men okay? I asked this because of this video that I came across the other day, and then did some subsequent reading, which we'll talk about later on. But let's start out by watching this video.
I saw a TikTok the other day of somebody saying that part of the reason why so many women are choosing to stay single and not get married is because there's way too many grown men that don't know that you're supposed to wash your booty hole in the shower. And it reminded me of the time I was dating this guy, and this TikTok from Nicki Minaj came up on my For You page where she was like, you need to wash your ass in the shower. And I saw that TikTok and I was in a silly goofy mood. So I asked him, I was like, when you're in the shower, do you like spread your cheeks to let the water in? And he was like, nobody does that. And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, I just asked both of my roommates, and they said they don't do that either. Like, literally nobody does that. And he was like arguing with me about the fact that you're not supposed to wash your booty hole in the shower.
Okay, so this can't be for real. This must be a joke or something. So I made the mistake of looking into this further as to like what is the rationale behind this sentiment, if it is actually a sentiment or it's just trolls saying stupid shit. I don't know. Apparently, and I heavily preface this because I don't know if this is actually the case, but the sentiment is surrounding the fact that if you do thoroughly bathe yourself, it's considered gay because you're touching your rear end or touching your front. And I'm choosing these words very carefully here, but what? Like, what do you mean? We've talked about toxic masculinity before, and that everything that men do apparently is, terrible and questioned and so on and so forth. I don't even know what to say. Oren, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I don't know either. I've never asked people, and I've taught human sexuality for I used to teach it until it's no longer offered at the place I used to teach. But I taught it many, many years. I've spoken about so many issues. I will talk about something related to it that I do know about. Okay, but this washing your booty hole, I had never heard that. So I've got to say, if that had come up during the time I was teaching that course, I would have asked people, and anyone who says, oh, yes, it's gay or whatever else, I say, are you insane? Okay. And I would set them straight. And I hope this is not the case. And I didn't know that this was going to be the theme of our podcast today. So I would have looked a bit more into it. But like, what are you seeing? I mean, is this a real thing? Or is this just like a tiny subset of guys who think this way?
I think it's a real thing. And like, again, at the risk of feeding the trolls, like, it seems like there's real discussion online about this and young men in particular not wanting to do this out of fear of the perception of their sexuality and it not being like manly to do that. Like, and again, I take issue with attributing gay to not being manly. That's ridiculous in and of itself. But that aside, I think the insinuation is that if something is quote unquote gay, it means that it's not masculine.
Right. So, in my class, I used to always talk about that. I talked about gender, these gender stereotypes and so on many times, whether in human sexuality or in my psychology of gender class. So one thing I did talk about, and this I know for a fact is an issue. Okay. I would say to students, look, even Freud was saying that the anus is an erogenous zone. And so I said, there are so many men who refuse to go there because, of course, and I asked the students and everyone would know that there's some stigma that, God forbid, if a guy touched it himself or if his female partner was touching it, that he's gay. And I would say to them, I'd say, look, like, and I spoke to many men, in fact, not just in class, but I would go out and when I was writing another book, I was interviewing many men, all right, especially in groups, and I'd look at them and talking. They talked. The manner was different when it was an individual versus a group, but the theme was the same, which was so many men were terrified that if a woman put her finger near his booty, or they weren't terrified, they were offended, sorry, that, that she would ever do that, because, again, she's questioning his masculinity. And I said, I'm pretty certain that most women, okay, if they're playing around and they think maybe it's a place to explore, I say if they tentatively, start fingering up there, okay, or around there, okay, I said it's not like there's something going to stick and go, aha, I knew it, you're gay. Okay,
Right.
so it's not right. Yeah. I said if you're at a bar and a man comes up to you, and a stranger, and he shoves his finger up your anus, I said, he might be making assumptions about your sexuality, but your female partner doing that,
Yeah.
no. So I would talk a lot about that, and I would try to get them to overcome this stigma and this fear. Okay, and if you think about it, there are, besides being called gay, which or a worse pejorative term. Okay, one of the greatest insults that you can say to a man to attack his masculinity is to accuse him either of being a cuck. Okay, which, and by the way, little side note here, I hate to do it. Okay, but so that cuck term became an insult a number of years ago among a certain demographic. All these, these right wing trolls and everything like that were calling everyone cuck, and nobody knew what it meant at first. Then people did, and it was almost like a little special code. Like, we know this term, others don't. Ha ha. Okay, and then it became so pervasive, almost everybody knows. But I would tell everybody, I go, you don't even know. Like, there's even cuck porn. Okay, and I say the irony is, you fools, this cuck terminology, the real meaning of cuck is from cuckold. To be cuckolded is that the man was basically like his wife was cheating on him, but he didn't know about it, and usually everybody else knew. Okay, and that was the premise of it. And so now the cuck porn, or this idea that you enjoy watching your partner have sex with other men, I say that's not actually where it's supposed to have come from. And by the way, the cuckold comes from the cuckoo bird, where the cuckoo bird, right? It would knock off, it would put its eggs in the nest of of another bird, and then the baby would be born. And anyway, so that's the history of it. Little digression there, but the point is, besides calling a man a cuck, besides calling him gay, the worst thing that you could call a man is, or saying that he likes to get pegged by his partner. Okay, basically having a female wear a dildo, a strap-on dildo, and and have penetrate him from behind. Okay, or whatever position. So, and you think about this is all an attack on the man's masculinity, and think of the themes that are right, that are inherent in this. So anyway, so we've talked a lot, or I've talked in my class a lot about that, and tried to help men overcome that shame and stigma and everything. I used to say, if as a man, you say, I'm not into any anal sex because I feel that, the anus is not an erogenous zone. I think it's a one-way exit only. Like, if that's how you are, fine. Then, there's nothing wrong with not wanting someone to, let's say, to play with your own anus. Okay. Or you doing it yourself. Okay. I say, if, however, you have no problem penetrating a female's anus, so it's not about, penetration of the anus per se. Okay. Then I say, then you really are, unfortunately, a victim of, of this bias, of this stigma and shame that's unnecessary. Because again, if you think it's okay for a woman to be pleasured there, why wouldn't you want to be pleasured there? And in fact, it's far more pleasurable for a man, because the men have something women don't have, the prostate. The prostate, truly, if stimulated properly, is very pleasurable. So I tried my best in front of thousands of students, over the years, to just help them to get rid of these, unnecessary burdens of shame and stigma. And in those lectures, I try to end off that segment by saying the most masculine men, the ones who have true masculinity, not just some bravado, are the ones who are so confident in saying yes, whether it's exploratory or whether I've already mastered the art. If I like to have certain body parts touched or penetrated, or licked or anything else like that, that they're able to go, yeah, that's what I like, and that's what I'm going to do, and that's what I'm going to ask my partner to do. That's true masculinity, to not be told what to do by others, but to say, I enjoy it, it's not harming anybody, I'm going to do it. So that's my rant.
But how sad then, and I think this is representative of a much larger issue, but how sad that young men are so confused by the messaging out there that it would impact their personal hygiene. Like that's the crazy part to me, is that out of this like clearly real fear of being portrayed or seen a certain way, they're sacrificing their hygiene. Like, that's absolutely insane. So again, the larger issue here is the lack of appropriate examples of proper masculinity. And we've spoken about this in many different contexts throughout various episodes of this podcast. But I think, it certainly bears revisiting, at least from this perspective, that what are the male role models out there that are actually portraying the true attributes of masculinity, such as being protectors, being problem solvers, being able to tolerate risk, all of these things that, have been turned into or termed as toxic masculinity. So, my point in saying all of this is that the messaging is incredibly confusing. And on top of it, there are terrible examples out there. So, where does this leave men?
Well, yeah, it's all a part of the same picture, or the same puzzle, which is this toxic messaging, and harmful and divisive messaging, pitting males against females. What is it? What makes a good male? What makes a good female? And that there are very few good males out there, very few good females out there. And I mean, the one thing that she did say right in that video is that more and more women are disinclined to date men, at least their age or even a bit younger, because they're having a hard time growing up. They're having a hard time, finding in themselves what would make me a good man, not a boy, not a man child, but a man. And there aren't that many good role models. And the real men, the most alpha males, also they are the ones who often, not all, but many of them are extremely toxic in their beliefs and what they say, in their alleged actions. So it is really confusing. And again, people might think it's weird that we're taking from this angle, and and he said perspective, pardon the pun. Okay. But, it's to me, because I'm a huge fan of metaphors and of symbolism. And that to me, truly, that thing about not washing your bum because it's not masculine. I think it's a great metaphor. And I'll say the interesting thing is, I wonder, and I don't know if you looked into this, whether these guys then would never ever use a bidet, because God forbid you have, water
Mhm.
shooting up there. Because
Yeah.
there are a number of men, like pretty masculine men on podcasts who wax poetic about the beauty of having these bidets. And a lot of them, I think, have bidets as sponsors. Okay, you can get these cheap bidets, or, these attach-ons, right? And so
Right.
a lot of these guys who talk about the most raunchy things, who are men in many ways, they love it. So I just want to say that there are some people out there who are kind of, broaching the topic in that way. Okay. But I would think
Interesting.
that, yeah, but I think that a lot of men, if they're afraid of spreading their cheeks to wash in a shower, I would think that
Mhm.
they would see the bidet as the gayest thing. And then the fact that the bidet is most famous in France, and the French are not known for their masculinity at all,
Mhm.
that would further, their fear
Interesting.
of,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
what is this? So, but it's, I got to tell you, that is ridiculous. But again, on a more connected to a bigger picture, um, so many young men and boys, and no time in the history has it been like this, are having access to so much bad messaging, right?
Mhm.
About what makes a good male, and so on. And it is confusing. And this is not a simplistic topic. It demands nuance. Children, young boys, they can't handle nuance. So somehow, like, it's hard. So they're just getting the simplistic message, right? A very, very simplest, and they're only getting part of it. So I really hope that, I'm going to say right now, I'm going to start asking people, just so you know. Okay, I'm going to post it all over the social media and ask, is this true? Have you heard of this? And I hope that
Mhm.
I'm going to do my part to help spread the word that no, like, again, basic hygiene, and if you, I'm just, again, to me, I'm not even thinking about that so much. I'm just thinking about that, and I'm thinking about all my patients, male and female, okay, young, teens, early 20s, even into 30s, who, in so many other ways, they are expressing or manifesting other, proof, basically, that they've been the recipients of some either toxic or simplistic or stupid messaging that is preventing them from moving ahead in life, right?
Exactly.
Whether
Yeah.
individually or with a partner.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and to tie this back to, like, why this is important to me, so when planning for the podcast, I'm like, what's something that's really irritated me lately that I've seen online?" And this is immediately what came to mind was this, and the way that this, ties into the work that I do is I think it's important for me to know and understand what's happening out there in the online world. What are the messages that are influencing the way that people conduct themselves, either in their personal life, in their relationships, or in society at large. So this then takes me to, okay, then how do therapists handle things like this? Are there actual good therapists out there who are able to provide sound guidance to, again, men and young men about either masculinity, identity, or both, that the two go hand in hand? And my answer to that is, unfortunately, I think the number of available individuals, professionals who are able to provide this sound guidance is dwindling. Um, and this goes to something that we've been discussing ongoing, outside of this podcast, which is the changes that are happening within our profession, within education, and the inability for these programs to equip therapists to be able to actually take a critical thinking mindset and nuanced approach to all demographics. This is a long-winded way of me saying that, unfortunately, our profession is really shitting on male therapists and men in general, specifically cis, white, heterosexual men. And I think that those are the men that are most susceptible to this terrible messaging that we're talking about.
Yeah, and I'm going to be self-serving here, and just by synchronicity, um, I have been engaged in or embroiled in back and forth discussions. Discussions is a fun, yeah, it's not the best word for it, but with a Facebook group of psychotherapists. Who one of them is a student, and he said that every single case that he saw about like in dealing with, let's say, clients with problems, he said that it was always about people who, like, let's say, people in the minority, okay, that they were always having problems. Now, he didn't say that's the issue. What he said was that they are always victimized because of their sexuality, the color of their skin, or something like that, okay, or their sex. And the perpetrators are always white, straight, non-trans men. Okay. And and he was trying to say, and people, I gotta say this, like he was saying rightly, what message are we giving? It's either implicit, which is very insidious, or explicit, which we can also see, which is just as bad. Okay, it's toxic. That the white straight man is the problem here. Okay, and everybody else suffers because of him. And when he posted it, and it was a very respectful, very polite, very articulately conveyed message, and most of the people in this group, many of whom remained anonymous, he remained anonymous as well because he doesn't want to get in trouble. He's still a student. And if a student, sadly, in this day and age, were to post this very reasonable concern, on a Facebook group page with
You're
others,
killing your career before it even starts.
done, right?
Yeah.
You'd be lucky to graduate maybe. So all these people
Yeah.
started, and then they totally missed his point. None of them, or very few of them, I don't think any of them who went against him, they were talking about how good it is. You have to understand about the minority experience. And yes, we understand that, but it's a portrayal again of the white man, blah, blah. So only a few people spoke out. Okay. And then I spoke out as well. And I've always said this. I said this for a long time. When you see somebody speaking out against the majority, whether the majority is like 100 people or even 3 or 4 people, then that majority is attacking them. Okay. And sometimes it's a blatant attack. Other times it starts off very, oh, we understand what you're saying, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And they seem so civil and ready to engage in good faith. But as soon as you don't bend the knee, and as soon as you don't say, you're right, everything you say is correct, I stand corrected, I will change my thinking,
Mhm.
then the mask comes off, and then they sometimes slowly, sometimes rapidly start getting aggressive. They start attacking the person. They start trying to go into reputation destruction, and that was happening here. It started to happen. So I spoke up and I said, I've always told people, when you see that happening, even if it's 1 against 100 or 1 against 3, still that one person feels so isolated and they feel so disempowered, and they're not inclined to keep going because they feel like, am I the only person who's seeing this? Like, am I the only one who sees the
Yeah.
emperor has no clothes? So in order not to, to suffer any worse fate, they shut up, not only then, but probably in future encounters. So I have always done this. I did this on X. I've promoted this as everywhere I can, where I say, if you see something like that, join in, show them that they're not alone, speak up, be polite, be respectful. So I did that. And of course, I'm a magnet of controversy. All these people started
Mhm.
coming after me. They started misconstruing what I was saying, and it started getting ugly. And these are, professionals,
And I was
psychotherapists.
just gonna add that, right? Like, it's one thing if it's on X, but these are colleagues in the same profession who are behaving this way and attacking others instead of having a discussion. So if people in our profession, and I do hold people in our profession to a high standard when it comes to emotional intelligence, critical thinking, and being able to have a conversation with people who are maybe opposing in views, I think that if anyone can, it should be people in our profession, but clearly not always.
And I'll tell you, I once said that years ago in the Ontario Psychological Association. And I got somebody who attacked me saying, that's the craziest thing you could say. That's so elitist and it's offensive. And they couldn't believe
What?
that. Yeah, literally said that. And I said,
Why is that
um,
elitist?
because how dare I say that psychologists should be able to have, to be able to analyze research or analyze facts and evidence better than the average person. And I said to her, I
Because
said,
they went to school for 7 to 10 years to be able to do that.
exactly. And I said to her, I said, I would expect a basketball player to be able to jump higher than the average person. I expect an accountant to be able to do math better than the average person. And that's
Yeah.
not elitist, but that's the kind of thinking that has taken over our professions, whether it's in the mental health field proper or in academia, that's churning out these weak-minded, weak-willed people who get emotionally dysregulated. They start acting like teenagers. And, again, if you want to do that on X, fine. I can just, shrug it off. But if you're the person who is responsible for the care of somebody, for making decisions about someone's well-being, if you're doing an assessment or report, if you're trying to help a family or an individual or a couple or whoever, these people are the ones who are teaching, who are training, and who are becoming, the therapists in the field, psychologists and psychotherapists. And
Mhm.
people are going to think that I'm blowing this out of proportion. I have seen this happen far too many times. It happened in another group of psychologists recently as well. Okay, and once again, I just brought up certain topics, and I was basically told, "You're wrong. This is the orthodoxy. This is the truth. It's just like gravity. And if you dare question it, you are a bad person. You are a harmful person." And again, I am not going to back down because I am not trying to promote hatred. I'm not trying to, to harm anybody. I am saying that the inability to recognize these realities is causing harm. And back to the whole discussion here, you and I have both worked with many males who have felt that they are being told that they are the cause of all the problems in the world, especially if they're white, especially if they're straight, and especially if they're not trans. And so, and so not only does it do something to their sense of self, but they also recognize, even if they know, even if they're able to go, what, I know this is BS. I know this is just propaganda and ideology. I'm not going to fall for that. They do know that going into society, trying to go on dates, trying to speak to people, trying to speak up in a profession, that they are going to be, treated a certain way. This is not hyperbole. This is not fear mongering. This is reality. And you and I have both worked with many people who've been suffering because of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I know that we're talking about men and masculinity, but I do want to just talk a little bit more about the changes in our profession and how harmful that is. And the fact that, you mentioned that people are getting dysregulated when having these difficult conversations. What's the plan then when you're working with a client? Because nobody's coming to see us because they're having a great day. So what is the plan when a client is in, the worst position they've been in their life? How are you going to deal with that? Perhaps they have differing views than you. Perhaps they come from a different background than you. Perhaps they're a cis white male. What are you going to do? How are you going to be able to properly provide this person with healthcare, because that's what we are as healthcare providers. Like I'm you can tell by the way I'm saying this, I'm very, very concerned with not only the impact this is having on men, but the profession as a whole.
Yeah, and you and I did a podcast last year on the American Psychological Association's document trying to help males, boys and men, and we went through
Yeah.
it and talked about just how ridiculous it was. So that's their attempt to try to try to help, and it was so biased and so harmful, I would say, and toxic. So Yeah, it is a problem, and the biggest problem, and we have to say this, and yeah, I'm not doing this to shit all over any profession. I'm saying this to, as a warning, both to people who are entering the profession and to any clients or patients who are hoping to, to get help. You know, the fact is, so many of these people, lack the insight to be able to recognize, that these problems are there. B, lack the knowledge and critical thinking and nuance, the capacity to see nuance to recognize that they've been educated or propagandized, to believe certain things, and they've taken it as fact. And these facts are not necessarily facts. So much of the supposed research that informs our knowledge, supposed knowledge on gender roles, on, minority stress, on all these different issues that may have some reality to them, but the way that they're portrayed in the research takes it beyond what is reality, and it starts veering into ideology, but it's taken as fact. So these people, they don't recognize that they've accepted all these things, and they're just reiterating, regurgitating the propaganda that was fed to them without recognizing, maybe there are some problems with these things. So they don't see that. So they truly, and again, I'm talking from personal experience, having had direct interactions with these people. And again, I'm not just complaining about it. That's not what this is about. This is saying, please, be aware of this. And it's also, by the way, I'm trying to encourage people who have seen the same thing, whether they've been the targets of it or whether they've just observed it. I'm saying what you're seeing is real. Okay. The emperor does not have clothes, and there are many emperors, walking around, and, and the fact is they truly do not recognize, they're not capable of seeing, it seems, that they are just, they've internalized, and they're promoting some harmful ideology, and it's truly having an impact on people. And again, when you ask the question of what are they going to do, when someone comes there, what if this person,
Yeah.
they're going through an ugly divorce? Okay, so they say they use some salty language, and they're talking
Mm-hmm.
about their ex-wife, with some maybe not some of the nicest language. Are you going to tone police them? Are you going to start getting dysregulated and not be present for them? And by the way, just so you know, I pointed out in this group, okay, that somebody, I forget exactly what I was saying, but I was saying that they were actually being irrational. Okay, because they were missing what somebody had said. They were putting words in people's mouths, in mine as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I was pointing out specifically this is being irrational, and someone wrote, well, like something basically, isn't it okay for them to get emotionally triggered or something like that, or emotionally dysregulated? I forget which word they used, but it was about emotional dysregulation. And this is to a post written by a colleague. You're going to get emotionally dysregulated in a form that you're reading from, on the screen. What the heck are you
Mm-hmm.
going to do when you have someone in front of
Yeah.
you who's acting in a way that doesn't align with how you think a man should act? So these
Yeah,
are
and
concerns.
I'll tell you what came to mind here. Oh, I don't know if I should say this. I will say it, and we'll determine if we keep it or not. But my thought is then, how are how are men supposed to access care that allows them to find that identity, find their masculinity, find ways in which to portray that in a healthy way, if there isn't a space for them to do that? Because, these individuals who are entering the profession and are in the profession, um, can't even tolerate a differing opinion, can't even tolerate, something difficult. And I did just clean up what I was gonna say, but that's kinda my stance here, is like, I feel like, what are we doing here? How are we actually helping people?
Right. I mean, our job, no therapist or psychologist should ever be expected to take abuse. Okay? They shouldn't. I mean, I've taken a lot of abuse because I know where it's coming from. And look, I'm a
Sure,
male.
yeah,
Like, I'm not
yeah.
physically threatened, mostly by my patients. Like, I'm pretty large. I'm not afraid that they're going to physically attack me. If I were a woman, especially if I had a certain history, I would understand that,
Sure.
right, if someone's getting upset or anything, I could feel myself. But our job is to both contain and regulate ourselves first and foremost, and then
Yep,
we'll be able to create a space where somebody can vent, can unleash, can let it out. And we're not
yep.
ranting and raving with them. We're helping them to be able to contain it. And we're modeling for them
Mhm,
self-regulation
mhm.
so that they don't become an abusive person in the real world, or they don't continue it if that's who they are, right? That's our job. And again, seeing how people act online, I have no confidence. I'm not saying it's everybody, of course, but the people I'm seeing, the young people, older people, okay, I am seeing that they don't have that capacity to self-regulate. especially their emotions, and B, that they don't have the insight to recognize that they have this problem, and C, despite not having the insight, they say, I do have lots of self-reflection. I understand what's
Mhm.
going on. If that were the case, you would be behaving very differently, especially in an online forum. You should not
Mhm.
be getting that triggered. So yes, this is a concern. And by the way, just one last thing about this, or one next thing, many of the people, and again, I don't want to just make this a rant session about that, but it was just the most recent incident. And again, I've seen this happen many times among supposed colleagues. But the point is, some of them have such black and white thinking that when we talk this way, they think we're saying that men, we're trying to make men stoic, guys who don't get in touch with their emotions, blah blah. And I try to say, no, you and I both, we help men get in touch with their emotions. We help them learn to identify them, to understand them, to regulate them, to engage with others in a healthy way emotionally, to be able to have empathy and so on. We do that, but we do that in a way that aligns with how they're processing it currently. We meet them where they are, and we elevate them. We don't try to
Yeah.
impose a certain type of emotional I don't know, communication or whatever, a way of processing it in a way that's too alien to them. We find a way to meet them and bring it up. And again, I'm just but these people with their responses, they're so black and white. They think that that's not
Mhm.
what we're doing. That we're only going to be solution focused, and not deal with emotions. It's
And
yeah,
I think
disheartening.
that's a big problem among a lot of the problems that we're identifying here, is that is a big shift in the profession. I don't think that a lot of therapists, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, and I'll pick on newer therapists, have that deep understanding that our job is to help clients to identify the emotion, regulate, deal with it, and move on. That's the biggest piece I think that is missing. And an example comes to mind of a male client of mine who works in the construction industry. So a very
Right.
male dominated profession. They don't talk about their feelings. They don't talk about anything. But I've been working with him long term because of a very tragic situation that's occurred in his life. And he actually said to me the other day that he never understood therapy in the past until he started working with me. And this isn't to pat myself on the back, but to illustrate the point. He said that I always thought that, because we live in a world where people are on this emotions parade and they're always talking about how they feel and so on and so forth, that's all therapy was. Because, like, what I now understand is I feel all of these emotions. What do I do with them? And
Mm,
now I know what to do with them. And I
right.
think that's what's missing a lot, and again, especially for males who, are in certain demographics, in certain professions, in certain, parts of society where you don't talk about it, and in not talking about it, that's where we see the problems that arise.
Right. And two things about that. So if someone who comes from that background comes into a session, okay, and they're talking about, again, they're not able to access their feelings in a productive or healthy way. And the therapist, again, doesn't meet them where they are, but starts asking, well, how does that make you feel? And blah, blah. Okay. And they're getting frustrated because the guy doesn't, then he's not able to put words to his feelings and so on.
Yeah.
Right. If they don't meet them where they are, he's going to go, okay, that's great. Okay. Like that's it. This is what therapy is. And they won't stay in it. Okay. Or if it's couples therapy and, again, the man's coming from a certain perspective, he's trying to be rational. It's like, well, could you not just see your partner's feelings and blah, blah. And he's feeling, okay, we spent the whole session talking about how bad of a
Mhm.
man I was, okay, and how I couldn't see her feelings. But what about the fact that she microwaved the cat? Like things like that. Like okay, they, I was upset at that and I yelled at her for that. That's all we talked about.
Mhm.
And again, it
Yeah.
sounds like we were being hyperbolic, but you and I have both worked with enough people,
Yeah.
both the clients and the therapists, because so it's not just us. We supervise so many
Yeah.
therapists that
Yeah.
we see so many of these cases of people, again, having had histories with other therapists like went like this. We're not exaggerating. It doesn't happen with everybody, but it does happen. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, and this is really interesting. So one of the people, I know I'm going back to that thread, okay, but one of the people said, what about cognitive behavior therapy? CBT, has pervaded the profession for so many years. Okay, so are you claiming that we're not, rational and not male focused and all this stuff like logical thinking and so on? Okay, like she's saying, and I said, so here's the funny thing about CBT. All right, and I've said this numerous times. CBT itself can be helpful, but it's only one tool, and CBT, and the way the CBT is practiced by so many people,
Mhm.
they are not really doing a great job because they're only focusing on the logic, right? And CBT, and again, I'm not saying this is the problem with CBT itself. I'm saying with how it's being taught and how it's practiced. So many people, they talk about feelings. Okay. And they give you a rating scale. Oh, how angry were you? 80? Okay, let's start with that. And then they work with it. But it's done so, let's say, abstractly,
Manualized
manualized,
and yeah.
rather than letting the person actually start feeling the feelings in the session. And having, uh, let's just say, I have worked with and I've helped facilitate workshops that deal with emotions, like emotion focused therapy. Okay. And I've been, trained in CBT and everything as well. And I just watch how, again, people are such strong proponents of CBT who truly hide behind the manual. Again, I used to do this in my
Mhm.
class when I teach it. I would say, like, they basically they hide behind the manual and they're doing step one, step two, step three,
Yep,
because
yep,
they are afraid of dealing with intense, just scary emotions. And they just want to say, no, 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 let's bring it from 80 to 20, step by step by step. Logically, we're going
yeah,
to force it down. And that's not how emotions work. So,
yeah,
again, I'm speaking to anybody who's either going into the profession or any potential clients or current clients. Okay. It's so important to make sure that either the therapist themselves, that's who you are, or if you're client with your therapist, that they are able to truly handle your strong emotions. And again, I'm not saying that that they should tolerate abuse. I'm saying that they should be able to not get triggered themselves. And if they are starting to get triggered, they've got to be able to regulate and modulate. And there's so many of the people that
yeah,
we're talking about who aren't, again, they don't have the insight to recognize that that being triggered at a message on the screen is a strong
mhm,
sign that maybe
mhm,
you shouldn't be in therapy, conducting therapy, unless you truly take this as a warning. Go, whoa, okay, I see that. I am feeling this, this physiological response or this emotional response. I got to recognize maybe I have some blind spots here. Maybe I have to work on it. So I want to be very clear because someone's going to try to, to complain that I'm saying that,
misconstrue what you're saying.
yeah, misconstrue it. Okay. I'm not saying they
Yeah,
shouldn't be therapists. What I'm saying is that if you're going to be a therapist, it's so important that you recognize your blind spots, you recognize your triggers, you recognize your vulnerabilities, and
yeah,
you make sure that you're not projecting your stuff onto your client. And by the way, and people don't know this, but there's nothing that says in Canada. Okay, I know that in Europe there are some places. There's nothing that says that a therapist has to undergo their own therapy. That should be mandated. I really think so.
mhm, mhm,
Psychoanalysts have to. They have to go through a couple of years of psychoanalysis before they can practice it themselves. Okay, and I'm not sure if that. I mean, anyway, so I don't know what the correct,
yeah. And we
process would be.
can utilize that as our professional development if we've undergone it, but it's not mandated, at least with psychotherapists in Ontario.
And same with psychologists. It's not
Yeah,
mandated. So we see many people who, theoretically they understand certain things, but when it comes to practice, they're not the greatest.
mhm.
And again, I want to be clear here. There are many great therapists out there, many great
Yeah, there
psychologists.
are.
There
Yeah,
are, but we're just talking about the problems. What are the numbers? I have no clue. Okay,
yeah.
because my anecdotes are just anecdotes. I just happen to maybe draw these people into my world somehow.
Then I do too, because, I'm seeing the same trends and, to the point about cognitive behavioral therapy, yeah, it's evidence-based. There's a lot of great science that supports it. However, the students and therapists that we work with at the clinic, I always will say this is one important tool and it's great framing, but you can't hide behind the manual, right? You have to be able to sit with those emotions and be able to regulate yourself, to be able to identify what we call transference and countertransference. Are there things that are, the client's bringing up that are triggering you and vice versa? Being acutely aware of that. And I don't know because it's been a while since I was in my graduate school training, but my fear is with this focus on um, I will say maybe political stances with regard to case studies and case conceptualization and so on. My concern is that we are losing the focus on the really, really important core skills that therapists need to be able to effectively help individuals. Um, to the point where as I've mentioned many times on this podcast, I work with a high volume of first responders, and it's happened more than once before a client knows me and has worked with me is afraid to tell me the horrific stuff that they've seen in their work because they don't want to harm me. And my response is always, please do not worry about me. My job is to support you. I have the tools that I need to be able to take this in and to process it. I don't know if that's the case increasingly as people are entering the profession.
Yeah, again, I can only speak anecdotally from what I've seen. I really am concerned that that's not the case. We're not training people
Hmm.
to be that resilient and to be able to be, it's not about you. It's about the person in front of you. That's,
Yeah.
and also, we've talked about this before. The most important element of therapy is the therapist client relationship, right? And to make a strong relationship, it's not just being supportive, it's being able to show them that no matter what you say, I'm trying to understand your perspective, I'm not judging you. Okay, I am a safe person for you to speak with because I'm being transparent, I'm being genuine. And to be able to show them, or to be able to convey that, the empathy, which is not feeling sorry for them but rather trying to really understand their perspective. Okay. And again, I'm not seeing enough emphasis on that. And by the way, just one thing, just, one of the people who commented in that thread, going back to it, they said that, look, if we use all these cases of these, marginalized groups, as as the people that are having these problems, then, you can, the underlying principles should be the same. Like, certain things about, whatever they're trying to teach, it can be, applied to any kind of patient or client. So I understand that. That's fine. Okay. But again, what so many of these people were missing is that almost gets clouded over or almost gets obscured when there's a narrative that's being presented that, that their problem is because they were marginalized, necessarily so, and it's
Hmm.
because of these, white, straight, non-trans
Yeah.
men that's causing,
Yeah.
right? So people are getting locked into that narrative rather than what are
Mhm.
the underlying principles here. Okay, it's not all, let's say black people are going to feel that they are, oppressed by the white man. Many will. We have to understand the systemic issues and so on. But again, if it's taught with nuance, then it's not a problem. But so many of the people that we're seeing in the field today, I don't think they have the capacity. Again, this is my personal opinion. I'm not saying it's fact, but I've heard it from enough people that makes me think that I'm right to some degree with a number of
Mhm.
people. That they don't have that nuance. They're just battering people over the head, and the most important points are being missed. And that's just fueling, to get back to the original topic, it's just fueling, a greater A, divide between the sexes, and B, making men less inclined to either go to therapy or stay in therapy. And there are many men who are suffering, as we've talked about in so many
Yeah.
podcasts. So we need them to be able to find healthy places, safe places to develop healthy coping skills, more adaptive coping skills than the toxic coping mechanisms. We are trying to promote healthy coping strategies.
Exactly. And yes, you precisely said what I was going to in terms of tying it back to the original topic, which is the lack of healthy examples for men. So I think you summed it up great there. But what do our listeners think? Have you come across videos like this? Have you come across things on the internet? What are your thoughts? Let us know in the comments.
Until next time, keep your eyes on the road and your hands upon the wheel.